feeling about this.
Since when do you know how to fly?
190 years old? You look great.
Push it!
So glad we took this job!
Solo, a Star Wars story. Firstly, a little history. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, known for 21 Jump Street and the Lego Movie, were fired as directors for creative differences, and Ron Howard, known for his appearances on The Andy Griffith Show and Happy Days, and for directing A Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13, took over to save the movie. Not only did he reshoot 70% of the film, but no photos or trailers were released until after the Super Bowl. Talk about keeping your movie a secret, but now that the film has arrived in our galaxy, will it be any good? Well, since I praised all the other movies, let's see if this movie ranks up with those. Firstly, we need to address where does this film fit in the timeline. Apparently, from what I read, it is set 10 years before the events of Star Wars. You know, the famous scene where Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi meet Han and Chewbacca in the Cantina Bar. But according to the YouTube channel Star Wars Explained, the film is set 9 years after Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, and 10 years before Rogue One in Star Wars. So in other words, if your Star Wars collection is in chronological order, it's The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, the Clone Wars TV series, both of them, Revenge of the Sith, then Solo, Rebels, Rogue One, Star Wars, or A New Hope, and so forth. Isn't that weird? And that doesn't include the Legends and Expanded Universe books, which has more story details and characters and events set in the Star Wars timeline and stuff. Now, I know it doesn't really matter because of the fact that these are, quote, anthology films and that they were meant to be more like standalone movies, but every time I hear things like taking place before the events of this film or this show, before or after this film, I have to place it somewhere in the timeline. After all, I have to put the movie on my shelf somewhere in my collection. Actually, to prove my point, look up the evidence in reference books, the internet, or even better, watch Star Wars Explains comprehensive video showing the entire history of the Star Wars galaxy from the beginning up to Episode 8, The Last Jedi. And yes, it does include Solo. It's the most involved and complex history lesson I have ever seen, at least for something as simple as Star Wars. I highly recommend it. Anyway, Solo, a Star Wars story. Unlike Rogue One, we get a backstory text. Not as good as the familiar text crawl, but it's better than nothing. In a time of no law, crime syndicates compete for everything, including food, resources, and hyperfuel, known as the Corodex. Lady Proxima hires refugees and runaways and has them work for her, stealing stuff in exchange for shelter on the planet Corellia. This is where we meet Han Solo, played by Alden Ehrenreich. The tough smuggler before he was a smuggler. He has a girlfriend named Kira, and their relationship is... well, I'll get back to that. Han joins a group of thieves in order to earn enough money to rescue his girlfriend on Corellia, who was kidnapped while they were escaping. These include Tobias Beckett, his wife Val, and Rio Durant, who has 4 arms and is the comedic sidekick of the group. And this is after Han rescues his eventual Wookiee companion, Chewbacca. But during the train heist to steal coaxium, Val sacrifices herself and Rio gets killed. So now what? Well, let's have Han join Tobias to meet Drayden Voss and work out a heist on the planet Kessel to steal more coaxium for Drayden. Okay. Fine. The pacing of this film is at times very predictable and at times unexpected. What I mean is that there's a whole thing about other people doubting him and saying things like, you don't listen and you don't take orders, that kind of thing. It shows that Han is an individual. He's different. But once again, we're doing the whole thing where you're different, you're this, you're that, you don't listen, you don't take orders, the whole shebang. Which can be very, very predictable and not very engaging. But on the other hand, this is a different Han Solo. Remember, this was before he joined the rebellion. This was long before anyone ever heard of a Death Star. This is a different Han Solo entirely. This is not the same Han we saw in the Cantina Bar 41 years ago. No, this is a Han Solo finding an identity And to be honest, I don't really know what to think. I mean, that's fine, but at the same time, haven't we seen the whole person trying to find his place in the universe? Haven't we seen that, like, way too many times? Also, Alden Ehrenreich is okay as the younger Han Solo. He has the same badass, smart-talking personality he always had, but at the same time, not to brag or anything, but I could have done better. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered to me because in all seriousness, out of the thousands of Han Solos out there, it was a hard choice, and Alden Ehrenreich was okay. Our opening scene is serviceable, with Han escaping with a piece of coaxium and getting taken to Lady Proxima. Lady Proxima's design is actually very interesting. It's basically just a caterpillar with a bunch of metal objects attached to her. It's interesting. At least it's different. Only to escape her with his girlfriend and his M68 Landspeeder, and then, as they were trying to leave, Han escapes while Kira gets kidnapped and he vows to come back and save her, all on the planet Corellia. But while this is an okay opening, I did actually like it better than Rogue One's opening, and especially the Phantom Menace's opening. We at least know more about Han. We learned that he got kicked out of the Imperial Flight Academy. The reason was simply he had a mind of his own and he never took orders well. That was probably for the best though. We also learned that it's the Empire who gives Han the Solo title. He signs up to join the Imperial Flight Academy to come back to Corellia to rescue his girlfriend, and he says he wants to be the best pirate in the galaxy. The Imperial officer gives him the last name Solo. I thought that was an interesting touch, to basically reiterate that he's the only one. We hear very briefly that Han's father wanted to be a pilot just like Han, of course, but he was stuck doing sea plantation or something like that. Look away and you'll miss it. We first meet Chewbacca when Han was scolded by Tobias for the first time and they meet fighting one another. There is a reason why he's the only Wookiee we see for right now. Chewbacca escaped because on his home planet of Kashyyyk, the other Wookiees were captured and enslaved by the Empire. Later on Kessel, we see other Wookiees and he does rescue them, but it's a nice bit of information. The other Wookiees on Kashyyyk were kidnapped and enslaved by the Empire? That's gotta be very hard on him, to know that he's the only one. We hear that Chewbacca owes Han a life debt to him, which would explain why Chewbacca has had a lifelong relationship with Han Solo. It's a brief mention, but I think it's a very nice, subtle touch. Some people may see their first encounter as cliché, but I'm actually happy that they didn't go with a whole generic, oh, I'm not gonna like you route. Let's talk about the supporting characters. We have Randall Calrissian, played by Donald Glover, who really did a good job of nailing Lando's laid-back attitude. He's cocky, but aware of himself. And that's exactly what Lando should be. No wonder why they get along. I liked him. I thought Donald Glover as Randall Calrissian was the best part of the movie. Kira, Han's on and off girlfriend, played by Emilia Clarke, is a different character. She is captured, but later on we learn that she is Drayden Voss's top lieutenant, and that Drayden assigns her to go with Han and Tobias' crew on Kessel to make sure that it goes well. I don't know if Kira and Han really love each other, or they just keep on meeting on and off and they just get along really well. But the romance is very vague and not very convincing for me. But smuggler and thief Tobias Beckett, played by Woody Harrelson, has often been compared to Long John Silver from Treasure Island. And they're right. He's doing these dangerous heists and gives Han words of wisdom, yet simultaneously becoming a cliché character later on. He tells Han not to trust anyone and assume that everybody will betray him, even though he will later betray Han by the end of the third act. And I'm like, oh yeah, gee, I didn't see that coming a mile away. You're the one that's giving him all this advice of assume that everyone will betray you, don't trust anyone, and yet it's like, oh yeah, you didn't learn your lesson, yeah, whatever. Also, he says that the Empire doesn't hire thieves and have a bounty on their heads at the same time. In other words, the Empire doesn't hunt down runaways. I thought he was a decent character, but he, outside of Han, Lando, Kira, and Chewbacca, are the most developed characters in this film. I mentioned Val, his wife, played by Crash and 2012 star Thandie Newton. Is she a three-dimensional character too? The answer is no, she isn't. We know that both Val and Tobias want to go back to their home planet so they can relax and Tobias can play a musical instrument again or whatever, but that's all we know of her. We hardly know anything really about her. We just know that she's a fighter and that's it. The same thing applies to Rio Durant. He's a comedic sidekick, but he can actually be funny at times. I actually thought he would become someone that we can connect to in the film outside of Han and Chewbacca, but that's not gonna happen. Why? Because they both die during the train heist, with Val sacrificing herself while Rio gets shot and killed. And it sucks that Fanny Newton was killed too early. We do have more supporting characters in the film. We also have Lando's droid companion, L337. I didn't like her. The reason was, well, it's pretty obvious. She's annoying, bossy, and not very interesting. It's like she's trying to find meaning in her life as a droid, but outside of that, that's about it. That's all the development we get from her. She doesn't have a love relationship with Rando, she's bossy, she's rude, she's just annoying. And in Castle, after she rescues other droids and then during the battle she gets axed off, I'm like, we were supposed to identify with L3, right? Also, we have Enf's Nest, who's a fierce warrior. She and her crew are pirates, and they became a threat in the beginning. She claims that Tobias stole the coaxium in order to work with Crimson Dawn, but we learn that she's actually part of a rebellion against the Empire. Yeah, the Empire's in this. I hardly ever talked about the Empire in this review. Okay, here's the thing about this movie. The Empire is barely in this. We see them in the beginning in the spaceport where Kira got captured and where Han signs up to be a part of the Imperial Flight Academy. P.S. There's an interesting advertisement in the background in the terminal where the Empire is asking for people to join the Empire, and the Imperial March from Empire Strikes Back accompanies the ad, which I thought was very interesting. And they do make an appearance in the Castle one, which I'll get back to that, but for the most part, we don't even focus on the Empire. Like, hardly at all. So there's no Darth Vader. Instead, we have Drayden Voss as the main villain. Drayden Voss lives on Vandor, where the train heist took place, who has a double blade with many red lightsabers on each end. Oh yeah, let me explain. Drayden Voss is part of an organization known as Crimson Dawn that was organized by Darth Maul, who hired Drayden to steal goods and other stuff. Drayden, who in turn would hire Tobias to steal stuff for him. Wrap your head around that. There are actually other crime syndicates mentioned in this film. There's 5 in total, but we only know of 3 of them. We encounter the Pikes, who live on the mining planet of Kessel, but we also hear briefly the Hutt Cartel. Thank you, Star Wars Explained, for mentioning that detail I missed. Oh yeah, let me explain more about what coaxium is. Coaxium is the key ingredient that helps power ships to go into hyperspace, but if it gets hit too much, it'll explode. So now you know why the stuff is valuable, because it's flammable. We also have the leader of the Pikes, Quaid Tosite, whose identity is a mystery, but runs Castle and then gets axed off thanks to Kira, all thanks to a fighting style known as Terra's Kazi. Wow. I didn't think that was possible. I didn't think that the horrible fighting game got a brief mention in this film. As always, I have to talk about the different worlds. Now, this was a tricky one because I actually had to look these up because outside of 2 of them, the others are totally nameless for the most part, so I had to look these up. But now, here are the different worlds of Solo. Corellia, Han's home planet, is a shipbuilding planet that is very industrial. It looks nice, I'll give it that much. It's dark, interesting, yet very unique. It reminds me of the underworld part of Coruscant in Attack of the Clones, but it's not as dark and depressing. At least it's more busy, if you ask me. Mimban, a mudbound world where Han does military service, is kind of like Paths of Glory in space. It's moody and has no life in it whatsoever. It was around during the time of the Clone Wars. Now it's a place of war between the Imperial Army and the creatures on that planet, and it doesn't have any life on it whatsoever, making the place feel deserted. Vandor, a snowy planet where the train heist takes place, and also where Drayden Voss is stationed. The train heist scene is actually a decent scene. It actually reminds me of a western from the 50s. It's cool, I suppose. Kessel, a mining world where the second coaxium heist takes place. We also see the Kessel Run for the first time, and it looks fantastic. It almost looks like a void of emptiness, similar to that scene in Star Trek The Motion Picture, and I'm glad to see it. Arguably, it's the best scene in the film. There's some random squid in the movie known as Shaman Venderov. I am just going by what I heard. And lastly, we have Savarine, a beach planet where most of the climax takes place. It has a refinery which was used by criminals once upon a time. I have to mention the Millennium Falcon. Seeing it was an amazing sight. It actually looks a bit different from the one we're used to. Sure, most of it looks the same, but it has a longer nose in the front. On the inside, it just looks a bit too polished for my taste. It looks too new for a ship called the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy. But again, this is before the original movie, so I guess I can't complain too much. Also, speaking of which, Lando Calrissian won the ship in a card game known as the Sebek. We see Lando and Han play it twice. Also, on a few side notes, there is no C-3PO or R2-D2 in this film. I don't even know why. And there is no mention of the Force whatsoever. Yeah, there is no mention of the Force in this movie whatsoever. Now, on the one hand, this relates to a scene in Star Wars where he says that he didn't believe in the Force. He didn't believe that there was some all-powerful entity that unites everything.
You don't believe in the Force, do you?
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything.
But by the end of Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and Episode 7, The Force Awakens, he believes in everything. The Jedi, the Force, the light and the dark, everything. By that point, he believed in the Force, but doesn't possess the Force himself. But here, for a Star Wars film to not mention the Force once is just disappointing. Also, I don't know if anyone cares at this point, because everybody pretty much knows about it by now. Darth Maul is in this movie. Yup, spoiler alert. He appears at the end of the film after the climax, or rather, the first climax. Without giving too much away, he basically says that Kira and him will be working with one another more often, then he just disappears. I was like, wait a minute, didn't he get cut in half by Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace? Although, then again, he does appear in the TV shows Clone Wars and Rebels, so, okay, fine, he's alive. Whatever. Oh, and Han shoots first in this film. He does it at the end of the film, but I won't say where at the end. Also, the movie just kind of ends abruptly for my taste. Again, without giving too much away, Han wins the Millennium Falcon from Lando, says to Chewbacca that Toby has mentioned a big gangster who is putting together a crew, they go into hyperspace, and that's it. That gangster is, of course, Jabba the Hutt. I honestly expected better out of an ending to a Star Wars movie. Overall, I'm torn on Solo. On the one hand, I wanted it to be different, I expected it to be different from the other films. In fact, it has to be different, otherwise you're just repeating the same stuff over and over again. But on the other hand, it was just a bit too different. I actually just recently re-watched Rogue One again, and I gotta be honest, I liked that movie a whole lot better. Why? Because in Rogue One, we cared more about the characters. We understood what they were going through. The whole mission to obtain the Death Star plans was a suicide mission, but they knew they had to take the risk because doing so would be a whole lot better than letting the Empire win. And without them, we wouldn't have had Princess Leia hand the Death Star plans over to R2-D2 and you know the rest. But this movie, I just kind of felt, I don't know, I kind of expected better. I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm not the only one, but I expected better. Overall, to be totally blunt, I thought Solo was just cool. Not great, not even a bad movie or anything, just cool. In other words, average to slightly above average. It's hard for me to recommend this film, at least when you compare it to all the other films. If you love Han Solo that much, you might get a kick out of this film. If you are a die-hard Star Wars fan like me, then you'll either like it or not. If I could sum up this movie in 4 words, it would be fun but okay movie. Take that for what it's worth. Fun but okay movie. 3 stars out of 5. I hope you enjoyed my review of Solo because it will be the last new Star Wars movie for quite a while. But until then, I'll do some more Star Wars videos in the near future. Thanks for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.